Okay, good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
First, I want to wish you a Rosh Chodesh Tov. Today is Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first of 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. This is a special month of mercy, and it's a month where we begin to focus on preparing for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the day of judgment, and the day, hopefully the day of forgiveness from the Almighty. So in order to get that, we have to work on ourselves. We have to recognize that we have things to improve on, all of us. So that's why immediately after Rosh Chodesh, starting on Tuesday morning, we have Selichot every day in the synagogue. It's very early, but on Sunday it's a little later. Sunday it starts only at 6:15. In the weekdays it starts 5:15. We do have some ladies, very holy ladies, they come every year. They come and they participate by reading and following along. You're all certainly welcome to do that. I'm here today as a substitute. Our normal presenter, Max, is unfortunately in quarantine with his family. Some of his kids, I think, are being looked at to see if they're positive and are not. And B'ezrat Hashem, they should all have refuah shlema. In the meantime, I think until Friday, until further notice, he's in quarantine. So I'm stepping in, and it's my pleasure to be here. Max's first assumption was, let's just cancel the class. My first reaction was, if it's working, why stop it? Let's keep it going. It's good. We have a great momentum. We have great ladies. The focus today is going to take me a few minutes to summarize the parasha we read yesterday, and then take a few points out of there to kind of analyze that will apply towards this time of year. Parasha is called Re'eh, and if you speak any Hebrew, you know Re'eh means to see, And what does it mean to see? It means, not just to look, but it means to really understand. It means to perceive. And you have to know that the Torah is God talking to you. It's God's instructions for you. If you pray and you read the Shema Yisrael, you'll notice that you're talking to, God's talking to you. That's the Shema. It's part of the Torah. God is talking to you. He tells you, Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, ve'hayayim shamoa tzitzit. God's talking to you. The entire Torah is God talking to you. Every word is important. And there's a message in every word, or I'd be out of business. I've been doing this a long time. So if the Torah is saying, Re'eh, Anochi noten lifnechem hayom beracha kulala, that famous line, God says, Re'eh, see, that I'm giving you today, there's two roads, there's two paths, there's two options. One is called beracha. What's a beracha? Blessing. The other is kilala. And that's a curse. So it seems like a no-brainer. You got two roads in front of you. You got the road of blessing. You got the road of curses. Which are you going to take? So we're going to be talking about that a little bit today. So if we listen to God's ways, we'll have a life of blessing. If we don't, we could be cursed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu also tells us in the parasha that the land that they were about to go into with Moshe Rabbeinu appointing his successor, Yoshua, Moshe Rabbeinu was not able to go into the land of Israel, but the next generation is going in with Yoshua, and he's told the land is a land that God is giving you, and it's a spiritual land, and it's a holy land. It's a very special land. And because of the sanctity, because of the Kiddusha in that land of Eretz Yisrael, it cannot tolerate Avodah Zarah, idol worship. You got to remember, when we got there, there was the 7 nations that were living there. There were Canaanim, Hitti, Yebusi, Perizi, Amorim, and these people were idolaters. And we had to destroy their altars. We had to destroy anything that remained from them, because we want to preserve the sanctity of the Kiddusha of Eretz Yisrael. Avodah Zarah is the antithesis of belief in God. It's the exact opposite. Avodah Zarah cannot be in the same world with God. We have to get rid of it. That's all there is to it. We're also warned a lot in the parasha about false prophets. Sometimes people come and they say they're prophets and they prove it, and the Rambam tells us a whole system how we prove who these true prophets are and who the false prophets are. And we're warned about false prophets coming and those who entice others to worship Avodah Zarah. If you to worship idol worship. If you look in the Torah, we are told that we are called Banim Atem Lashem Elokechem. We are sons. Sons means male and female together. We're children of Almighty God. And then the next pasuk right after that, this is chapter 14, verse 1. Then chapter 14, verse 2 says, Ki am kadosh ata Lashem Elokecha, because you are a holy nation to the Lord your God. Ubachar bachar Hashem, and you, God has chosen liyot am segula, to become a treasure. God chose the Jewish people to be His treasure. So not only are we children of God, but we're His treasure. And there's a difference between children of God and treasure. We're all children of God, but only Am Yisrael is the treasure of God. Oh, morning has arrived. Thank you so much.
It's hot.
Thank you. Oh, okay, we got fuel. We're good now for a few more minutes. Thank you. I remember when I was growing up in San Diego, my rabbi was telling us one day in a little meeting we used to go for, class, and he said one of the missionaries came knocking on the door, and he said, "Do you believe that Yoshka is the son of God?" And he knew he was the Mizuzah, was a rabbi, and my rabbi said, "Yes." And this guy was completely blown away. He goes, "What?" They never told us how to deal with someone who agrees with us. They only teach us how to argue with them. So he says, "Rabbi, can you explain?" And he says, "Yes. Banim atem lashem atem. You're all children of God. God's our Father. We're all children of God. You're a child of God, just like Yoshka was a child of God, just like I'm a child of God. We're all good. But are you part of the Am Segula? Are you part of the treasured nation? That's even a higher level. That's a different story. So that's an important thing. So we're also told in the Parasha what foods that we're allowed to eat and what foods that we're not allowed to eat. Which animals and which animals we're not allowed to eat, which animals we are allowed to eat. And if we had enough time, we can talk about that too. But I don't mind. It's all good stuff. Then the parasha continues, and it talks about something called Masercheni, which means the second tithe. Now, I want to just take a second and talk about this for a second, because people are very confused. What is Maser, Maser Rishon, Maser Sheni, Maser Ani? There's all these different terms. And did you ever hear the word Tirumah? They talk about you have to take Tirumah and Maaser. And everybody's like, I don't know, is that Tirumah? Is that Maser? Is it Maser Rishon, Maser Sheni, Maser Ani, Maser, what's the system? So if you pay attention, I'll give you something that'll help you understand the whole thing. You ready for this? Okay. Is the recording working? We want to make sure we get this one. There's something called Tirumah Gedolah. And that means that if you have a field, and in the temple era, a Jewish landowner, he was required to separate certain portions from his fruits and vegetables to be designated not for his own use, but to be given to certain groups of people. Tirumah. Okay. So what is the Tirumah? Basically, you start like this. There's something called Tirumah Gedolah. You take whatever produce you have of the crops, and you take 1/60th of that. Okay, 1/60th. Now, this term 1/60th of whatever you produce, it's a rabbinical term. The Torah doesn't tell us exactly how much to give. So the rabbi said 1/60th is called Tirumah Gedolah, the main separation you take. If you want to do a little better, you give 1/50th. If you're wealthy and you can afford it, you give 1/40th. But basically, the general rule, you take 1/60th of whatever you grow. So if you have a field and you divide it up into 60 squares, you take 1 square and you give that to the Kohanim. That's called Tirumah. Why? Because the Kohanim and Levim, the Kohanim didn't have their own land. They're part of the tribe of Levi. And they didn't have their own fields to grow produce like you did. You were lucky you had field, you have to share with everyone. So that's called Tirumah, and 1/60th of the whole thing. But then there's another tax further on top of that. It's all tax. This thing taxes, right? So you've already taken one of your 60 squares and given it away. You have 59 squares left. Of the 59 squares that you have left, you take 1/10 of that and you give it to the Leviim. And you do that every year. So every year you give 1/60th of everything to the Kohanim, and then whatever's left, you take 1/10 of the remaining part and you give it to the Leviim. And then we get to the next stage. There's the next stage called Masercheni or Maaser Ani. Masercheni means the second tithe, which is really our third if you're counting. But the way it works is like this. We have how many years in the Shemitah cycle? 7, okay? So on years 1, 2, 4, and 5, you take an additional 10th of whatever is remaining, and you take that as the owner, and you take that up to Yerushalayim, and you eat it, and you enjoy it over there. And if it's too far, or you have too much, you're allowed to sell it where you are, add a little penalty of 1/5 to that, take that money and go to Jerusalem and eat and enjoy those fruits there. That is in the years 1, 2, 4, and 5. What about in the year 3 and 6 of the 7-year cycle? That's called Maaser Ani. Instead of you eating that in Jerusalem, you take that money, and that money is designated for the poor people exclusively. So basically, when the Torah says you have to give this idea called Maaser Sheni, I just want you to have an idea of what it was. It wasn't that that's all you had to do. Only Maser Sheni is really focused on in our parasha. The other halachot are focused on in other parashiyot. So again, that's the way that's working over there. So we have Maaser Sheni, Maaser Ani. Both of those are in the parasha. And then the Torah goes on to talk about the Shemitah year every 7 years. Now you have to know something about the Shemitah year. By the way, it's starting another month. That means that if we're really following Torah law, and there are farmers that do this in Eretz Yisrael, and we should do this, they don't work their land for the entire year. The Torah says, let it go fallow, let it just stay empty. And they're doing that. But one of the most difficult things about the Shemitah year, and I don't know how many people really are aware of this, but if you made a loan to another Jew, are you allowed to charge interest, first of all? No. A Jew cannot charge interest to another Jew. Did you know that that loan is canceled in the 7th year, at the end of the 7th year, Shemitah? The loan is canceled. So that means that a guy comes to you and he says, I want to borrow some money. And you look at your calendar, you take out your phone, and you go, oh, wait a minute. We only have 10 months left. You want me to lend you $5,000? Well, I'm not so sure I'm going to be able to collect it all back from you by the end of that year. So the Torah says, still lend it to him. Why? Because it shows your faith in God that He's going to make it up to you some way, somehow. I tried it. Giving tzedakah, when you don't really have it, is the only way to get it. The years that I gave less tzedakah, we lived on less. The years that I gave more tzedakah, I promise you, you could ask my wife, the more we give, I don't know, God keeps sending it. I don't know where it comes from. And God says you can test me on this. God says you can, only on tzedakah you can test God. You can test Him. Give the tzedakah. So the guy comes, and by the way, what I'm talking about as a loan, that's one of the highest, if not the highest form of tzedakah you can do. Wait a minute, but I'm getting my money back. Yes, but you allowed someone to use it interest-free, and he was able to build, hopefully, a career or a business or something where he got it on his own 2 feet. That's better than giving him money, telling him, here, go buy dinner tonight. Give him a way to make his own money. He'll feel better. You're doing a tremendous mitzvah. So, if you did not collect your money before the end of the Shemitah, you have to forgive that debt. So you're supposed to trust, and that's what the Torah wants, and that's what God wants. But people are people, and they think that the money they have in their pocket is the most important thing, and they don't really trust HaKadosh Baruch Hu so well. So the rabbis came up with a little loophole. Hillel, you ever heard of Hillel? Yeah, you heard of it? Hillel came up with this great loophole. He noticed, you're not allowed to take the chart, you're not allowed to demand payment after the end of the Shemitah year. You, an individual, is not allowed. But organizations are allowed to. So what you do is, if you have a loan that you give to someone, you have a paper, right? You have a piece of paper. You sell that paper, or you give that paper over to the Beit Din. Now the Beit Din is an organization. The Beit Din now can go and collect that money. And when they collect it, if they want to give it back to you, they can. They're entitled to do that thing. That's their right. And that's called a pruz bol. It's a combination of 2 words, meaning poor and rich. By the way, if you think that if you give tzedakah to someone who's poor, if you think that only you are doing the mitzvah, you're wrong. He's doing the mitzvah by taking it from you. Because if there are no poor people around, how are you going to do the mitzvah? It's a 2-way street. You need the poor in order for the wealthy to give. And what's the beracha of giving? That God says, you should never be in need of receiving. You should always be a giver rather than a taker. And that's what we want. Sometimes people need help. There's no busha, there's no shame if you need help. But it's always better to do that thing. So the Torah is teaching us about tzedakah, basically. And the rule is, every poor person that asks you, if you can, you're supposed to give to him. The only thing is, yes.
Can I ask?
Yes, of course, but loud. So
Yeah, about the Maser,
Yes.
and what you said like about
Yes.
5 minutes ago, I don't want to lose it. So how is related to our life today? Because we don't have field, we don't grow vegetables. How we should do it?
dollars. How much money did you make last year? Take
What about 160?
So-
10 Maser. I want to know what is.
So the rabbi said that from the Torah, there's no real minimum dollar amount or of tzedakah, but the rabbi suggested 10%. If you're wealthy and you can afford it, up to 20%. Now, and if you can't afford it, 5%, 4%, anything. Even the guys that come to the synagogue in the morning and they have their hand out and they haven't changed their clothes in 2 weeks and they're homeless or whatever, and you give them $1 every morning, you don't know. You send them in to the husband, make sure they have dollar bills in their pocket. They're not going to the clubs. They're coming here, trust me. And they're going to use it, and it's going to be good. So we see them every day. It's an amazing thing. The IRS actually allows you to estimate how much you give in cash to charities. And I don't know to these guys if you can deduct it or not, but if you give to the tzedakah, to the kuppah every day, you put $1 in there also, they allow you to estimate that. It's, I go to shul, you have to be honest how many days a week you go to synagogue, but figure it out, okay, I can deduct $200, $300 from the charity box contributions. But in any case, the rabbis don't want someone to give more than 20% of what they earned that year. Why? Because I gotta tell you, one time a guy passed away and they invited me to the house, and the son said, Rabbi, whatever you need. And I had a little synagogue at the time, and we needed a Sefer Torah. And I was a young rabbi, I didn't know any better. I said, well, if you really want to do something nice, we need a Sefer Torah. He says, okay. And he goes to the safe, he unlocks the safe, and he hands me a stack of cash this thick. I was, remember this? And And I felt so bad because I took advantage of him when he was vulnerable. And I really should not have done that. I should have waited till after the 30 days. Think about it. Is this how you want to honor, your dead mother or father or whatever you want to do? Because the Torah says people get emotional at times, and they might give more than they could really afford to give. They don't want you to give more than 20% of what you earned. Okay, so you got $10 million in the bank, maybe that's a different story. But if you're like most of us, and your paycheck comes in, your money goes in, your money goes out, then there's kind of limits on that. But I want to tell you, because of a little something to do with the IRS looking at my taxes for 2019, it's not a pleasant thing. I realized that I am probably about 2.5 years ahead of my Maaser schedule. In other words, if I gave no Maaser for the next 2.5 years, I'd be good, because I gave more than what I intended to give according to my specific calculation over here. So you can do that. You can go ahead. You can go ahead. I know my brother has a limit of, I'll give more than I'm supposed to give this year if you really need it, but I'll only go a year ahead of where I'm supposed to be. It's a nice thing to do. It's a nice thing to do. So anyways, we are commanded in the Torah to be rahamim, to be merciful and always help fellow people. And the reward for giving tzedakah is, including loans, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises that you'll never be in a situation to have to ask. Did you know that the guy who comes, I started to tell you this, the guy who comes to collect money in the morning, you give him money, you give him $1, he now has to give 10 cents of that to tzedakah, to some other guy who needs it less than he does. Everybody, it's a never-ending cycle. It just keeps going on. It's kind of like your credit card bill. It just keeps going and going. Also, the Torah. I'm still summarizing the parasha, so just let me know if I can.
You're fine.
Okay. It's kicking in the coffee, so you never know. I might be here a while. There is a concept that Torah reviews over here, and we're going to be learning about it in different parashot as well. But this is the law of the Eved Ivri, of a Hebrew slave. The idea of a Hebrew slave is we don't like slavery. We were slaves. The Torah keeps reminding us we have to treat people nice. We have to treat people fair. We have to pay our workers on time. We can't mess around with them, and so on and so forth. So there's a guy, a Jewish guy, let's say, and he gets in trouble. Maybe he steals something and he gets caught and he has to pay it back with a fine, maybe 2 times what he stole, maybe 4 times, maybe 5 times. The Torah has different rules for different cases. He's got to pay it back. But he blew the money already. He went to Vegas and he had a good time, and the money burned a hole in his pocket and it's gone. He wasn't putting those dollar bills in the kuppah, okay? He was somewhere else, doing something else. So now, the Torah says, what are we going to do? Put him in jail? Put him in jail where it costs us $300,000, $400,000 a year to keep a guy in jail? Are we going to, what are we going to do with him? We want to rehabilitate him. How do you rehabilitate this guy? You know what you do? You find a Jewish family that can afford it, and you say to him, listen, this guy owes $100,000. Give us the $100,000, we'll pay off his debt, and he'll become your Eved Ivri. He becomes your worker. But you have to treat him right. You have to treat him like a member of the family. As a matter of fact, in some cases, you treat him better than a member of the family. What's the Gemara say? If you sleep with 2 pillows, he has to sleep with 2 pillows. If you sleep with a blanket, he has to have a blanket. If you only have 1 pillow, between both of you, he gets it. Okay? You have to treat him right. He's an Eved Ivri. He's a human being. Why is he with you? He's in your family to be rehabilitated. He's going to see a Jewish family, an Orthodox family, one that follows Torah, one that's going to listen to the rules, and he will watch you, and he will learn from you how beautiful Shabbat is. He sings the Mirot at the table, the kids come, they get their berachot, the grandkids come, they kiss your hand, and it's just a wonderful, amazing thing. and he wants to improve himself by being better. But you paid for him, and the rule was when you bought him that this contract ends at Shemitah. He goes free. So at Shemitah, he goes free. Not only does he go free, you have to send him away with gifts. You got to give him, his own coffee machine, because he's got used to the good stuff, and now he doesn't have it. I don't know. You got to give him from your wine, from your grapes, from your olive oil, from your field, whatever you grew, whatever you produced, you have to give him. You can't send him away empty-handed. And you give him a lot of gifts. But, as a lot of times it happens, they get used to, they like where they're at. They get used to their meals provided for them. Yeah, they have to work a little bit. They have to work. But they have something to do. They have an environment that they enjoy being in. So they go to the guy and they say, I don't want to go. Yeah, Shemitah is coming. You have to go. I paid for you. And, now your time is up. Here's some money. Go start your own life. Start my own life. I'm living in a nice place. You're a good person. Everything is wonderful. I want to stay here. So what do you do to the guy or girl? You pierce her ears, right? It's not only the men. It's the women too. If she said, I don't want to go, fine, stay. You take them and you bore a hole in their ear, not nail it into the door, saying this ear that heard at Har Sinai that you should not be slaves and we should be free. Why do we want to not be slaves? Because we want to be slaves to God. We want to be free to serve God. And if you're an Evet to someone else, you're not free to serve God completely. So you want to do that, and you want to stay forever, that's fine. Stay forever. Question: what does forever mean? Does forever mean forever? Or is it like when you buy a mattress in California, a lifetime guarantee is 7 years? Forever means until when? To Yovel. Remember, there's Shemitah. There's a 7-year cycle. And we're aware of it because we're giving this tzedakah in the first year, and this one in the third year, and this one in the 6th year. And then it comes the 7th year. So you go to year 8, and you're back to year 1 again. It's a cycle. And when you have 7 cycles of 7, and you complete 49 years, the 50th year, the Torah says, is called Yovel. You go free no matter what. You got a hole in your ear, you got a hole in your head, you go free. That's it. Because no one should ever be permanent. Torah just doesn't go there. And then we're also told in Parashah about sanctifying the firstborn of our animals. And we're not allowed to use the firstborn of our animals, of domesticated kosher animals, for any type of labor, but rather we take them to Jerusalem, we sacrifice them, and we could eat them there. The only exception would be if an animal had a physical defect. If an animal had a physical defect, then it's not ra'ui for a korban. It's not fitting to be on the altar for a sacrifice. Okay, we're almost done with the parasha. And before I start the commentary, okay. Then the Torah talks about the chagim. We have something called shalosh regalim. What are they? What's the first one? First one. Pesach is the first one. Second one is Shavuot. Third one is Sukkot. And why do I say the first one's Pesach? Because you look at the Rosh Hashanah, you say, oh, Tishri is the beginning. You might say Tishrei. It's really Tishri, you should know. But you're looking at the month of Tishri. It's the beginning of the year. It's Rosh Hashanah. It's month number 1. No. Torah says Nisan is the first month. Tishri is the 7th month. Torah says it. B'chol Shashvi'i. That's when you're going to have Rosh Hashanah. That's when you're going to have Yom Kippur in that month. So we start with Pesach. And the Torah reviews the laws of eating the Korban Pesach, the prohibition, the Isur of eating Chametz, and the commandment to eat Matzah. And right after that, starting with the second night of Pesach, which for us outside of Israel is the second Seder, there's another mitzvah that used to be a biblical mitzvah. Today, most people say it's rabbinic, and it was another korban that was brought, and that was called the Korban HaOmer. It was a sacrifice. Omer was a measure of barley, and they would bring it on the second day of Pesach, and then they would start counting the days from Pesach to Shavuot. How many days between Pesach and Shavuot? 49. 7 weeks. Interesting. Shemitah, 7, and then 50th is Shavuot, and that's where we received the Torah. Okay, so we got the Shavuot, and then the Torah goes on to explain the mitzvah of Sukkot, and we have to do the right mitzvot of Sukkot. We take the 4 species together, and you have to build. You have to eat inside of a sukkah, and we're commanded to rejoice on all the chagim, on all shalosh regalim. Why is it called shalosh regalim? Shalosh is 3, because of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Regalim from the word regel. You walk up with your legs. That's called aliyat regel. You had to go to Yerushalayim 3 times a year to rejoice over there. You get to Yerushalayim, and you see the Kohanim, and you see the Levi'im, and you see the Torah, and you see everything, and you become so inspired. Ask the girls that go to seminary for a year if they want to come back after a year. You all right? Doesn't happen, does it? They all insist on Shana Bet. Why? Right? Because it's the greatest experience in the world, going to Eretz Yisrael. It's the greatest thing that the kids can do. And so that's what the Torah wanted us to do. And to make pilgrimage, to make this and that. Okay. So that's basically a summary. That was only a 35-minute summary, right? Okay. So now I want to tell you something. We began the parasha with a choice between beracha and kilala. Remember, blessing and curse. Everyone knows the terms, right? Okay. When you make choices, some choices are easier than others. Okay? And the example I always use is chocolate ice cream versus vanilla ice cream. How many want chocolate? Raise your hand. How many want vanilla? How many don't want any? I forget. I don't believe you. Okay. So it's an easy choice. It's an easy choice, right? You're shopping for a car. You want a Range Rover or you want a Jeep? You know, which do you want? You want a Lexus? You want a Audi? You know, it's this one or that one? Is one bad and one good? They're both good, right? Chocolate ice cream is good if you want chocolate. Vanilla is good if you want vanilla, and that's the way it is. So I was telling Ruth the other day that I don't know why I know this, but when you analyze this, it's called a conflict, chocolate, vanilla, but it's called an approach conflict. What does that mean? Chocolate's good, vanilla's good. Which do I want? I'll choose one. It's called the approach conflict. It's a no-brainer. You take whatever one you want. You have a choice between enjoyment of 2 beautiful things. Neither choice is going to hurt you, except you might gain a little bit of weight. There's another type of conflict that you have, and that is where you choose between 2 unpleasant options. Root canal or colonoscopy? You don't have to raise your hands this time. You have to spend 30 days in jail, or you have to pay a $10,000 fine. You're thinking. Is 30 days in jail pleasant? No. Is paying $10,000 as a fine pleasant? No. Or if someone, lo alenu, was told that they were going to be executed, and they had a choice, you can be killed by hanging or by firing squad. What's the difference at that point, you know? Okay, so both of those are unpleasant. And so what they call that type of conflict is an avoidance conflict. I don't want either of them, but I have to. If I have to choose one, they're both bad for me. Neither of them are pleasant. So we had the approach, the chocolate and the vanilla, the Audi or the Lexus. You have Maui or Bali. You know, where are you going to go on vacation? It doesn't matter. It's all good. And then you have the root canal and the colonoscopy, all bad. Then there's another one, and this is the one that the Torah focuses on in our parasha. And that's called the approach avoidance. I could use these terms now because you know what they are. Approach avoidance conflict. You choose between something that is pleasant and between something that is unpleasant. Okay, chocolate ice cream or root canal? Raise your hand. Chocolate ice cream? Even those of you that said vanilla before still chose the chocolate, right? Okay. A trip to Maui or a $10,000 fine? We're going to Maui, right? Okay. Bring the sugar, please. Okay. And you want the Mercedes G? What is it called? The G car, the G thing, or you want the execution? Yeah, whatever you choose, But you'd be crazy to choose the unpleasant option over the pleasant one. Parashat Re'eh, now I'm getting there, is the classic example of approach, avoidance, conflict. The first pasuk spells it out very clearly. Moshe proclaims, Re'eh, Re'eh, not just look, but see, but understand, internalize. Anochi, I, God, noten lifnechem, I'm putting in front of you a choice. Hayom, today, every day, not just once. It wasn't 3,500 years ago. Today, beracha u'kelala. You can choose. You want the life of blessing, you want the life of curse. If you obey the mitzvot, we know it's a blessing. And if you don't obey the mitzvot in the Torah, we know that it's going to lead to a life of curse. Okay. You're looking at Rabbi Adatto right now, talking to you. Pretend it's not me. Pretend it's Moshe Rabbeinu for a minute, okay? I'm going to cover my face with a veil, and Moshe Rabbeinu is offering you blessing or curse, reward or punishment. Which are you going to choose? Is there anyone who's going to choose the punishment or the curses? Anyone here that's going to do that? We can agree, right? We would all go for the satisfaction, for the pleasure, and you might think that it's human nature to always go for the good and the blessing and to do good and to follow good examples. But you know what? Sadly, that's not the way it always turns out. Sometimes, even when you're striving for berachot, looking for berachot and blessings, you get sucked in. You get drawn into the curses. So, the Torah sets the stage for us. We're coming into Eretz Yisrael, and we're going to be standing in a valley, and there's two mountains. And one mountain is green, and it's luscious, and it's alive, and a few feet away is another barren mountain. That's what the Torah says. And I've been there. We climbed it. We climbed the green one. We climbed it. It's still today. There, you can see there's one here and one there, just right across from each other. Har Gerizim and Har Eval. And one is completely barren. And God says the kilalot, the curses are going to be read on that mountain, and the berachot are going to be read on the live green one. And you're going to be in the middle, and we'll see which way you gravitate. We'll see which way you go. Now, you would think that we would all be gravitating only towards the berachot, right? But did you ever know someone who chose a self-destructive path for themselves? And in doing so, they brought down everyone around them who loved them deeply? Is there anything worse than that? And in doing so, they cause harm to people that they love. You know how many people over the years, I started to make a list, people I know that have talent, they have brains, and they just completely ignore common sense, and they get into trouble in their lives. You can't imagine, how does a smart guy like you get yourself into a hole like this? What were you thinking? Were you thinking? People, they throw away their marriages for a stupid thing. They throw away their careers and good job opportunities by using poor judgment. Why would someone do that? Beracha is over here, Kilalah is over there. What makes them do that? Who wouldn't choose blessing over curses? Who wouldn't choose success over failure? And who wouldn't choose joy over sadness? Parents, all they say, I just want my kids to be happy, right? We've all said that. I just want my kids to be happy. Of course we want blessings. Of course we want success. Of course we want joy. But achieving those goals is not as easy as just, I want my kids to be happy. We have to do something. We have to do something about it. So now, the problem is, you have to be a happy person yourself. You have to live a good life yourself and be happy with life, with whatever God gives you, and make the most out of it if you want the people around you to look up to you and to follow you. But if you're a parent that is always depressed, always cynical, always angry, always criticizing, what do you think your kids are going to grow up to do? Think they're going to embrace the good path and the mitzvot and the Torah and the good jobs and the good schools? If you're cynical, if you're angry, but it's not so easy. I'll tell you why. Did you see that Hamas is still firing rockets into Eretz Israel this week? There's still underground terror tunnels. Iran is still building their, they're getting ready to declare war. Israel's getting ready to attack Iran. Syria is still up in arms. The West, everything in the world, that's just that region. Then you go to London, and it's open season for Jews on the street. And you come to America, and you know how many people now are calling me, telling me I'm not wearing my kippah, I'm only wearing a hat, and I want to shave my beard and put my tzitzit inside. They're scared in America. They're scared. And the worst place is college campuses in America. It's the worst place to be right now. Because you are identified as a Jew. So we have problems in Israel and Iran and Syria and Gaza, Lebanon. And when Israel responds, what does it say in the New York Times? Disproportionate.
Yes.
What does disproportionate mean? It's code.
Not enough Jews were killed.
Not enough Jews died. That's the code. That's exactly what it means. So when it says a disproportionate response, you know that's exactly what it means. Not enough Jews died. So the Taliban is taking over Afghanistan as America is pulling its soldiers out. Right now, I watched the news last night. And so I'm a news junkie, right? And you get depressed. And when you get depressed, you get cynical. And when you get cynical, you're angry at everything. And everything is bitter. And everything is bad. Right? Everything is terrible. And, it's just terrible. So now, what's going on? In Ferguson, just, a year or two ago, someone got killed by a police officer, after a whole ugly incident. Nobody cared about the facts. All they cared about was, how can we turn this into race baiting and divide this country further? So I am so angry at things like this. I'm so angry. So we're inundated with bad news. But I want to be a person of beracha. I want to be a person of simcha. I want to be re'eh anochi. I want to choose the beracha, but I'm getting sucked into the kilala. So how do we do it is my question for today. And the answer is, it's precisely during the difficult times, precisely when things are as bad as they can get, that we have to look for the good and recognize the good in our lives. That's the message for today. What positives can you extract? What positives can you take out from depressing news? I'll give you an example. Israel's being attacked by the Hamas rockets flying in even over this weekend. How in the world is there any positive news over there? Anyone have an idea? Oh yeah? Huh?
That the rockets are going to the sea, that they're not landing.
Yeah.
Either they're terrible aim, or Baruch Hashem, they have this thing called the Iron Dome. And so that's positive. It could be much worse. And the Iron Dome, where does that come from? Who helped with that technology and funding? The United States. They started that thing. So right now we saw either they're misdirected and they're falling short. A couple of them fell into Gaza themselves and they're killing their people and blaming us for it because they're terrible shots. I can't help that. I can't help it. Stupid is stupid. One of my favorite things was when ISIS a few years ago was going after some of the Yazidi women, and they were doing terrible things to them, and then putting it on YouTube and filming it, and they were just doing horrible things. So the Yazidi women, they picked up their rifles and they trained themselves, and they went after these guys. And the Islamo-fascists that were doing this, the terrorists that were doing it, were scared out of their minds. You know why? Because it's one thing to die in battle. It's another thing to die in battle at the hands of a woman. Because they believed that if they got killed by a woman, that they're not going to heaven. Newsflash. They ain't. They're not going. They're not going. Even if the men killed them. Even if, they're not going there. But they believed if they were killed by a woman, that they're not going to get into heaven. And so these Yazidi women, they started training themselves. I was the proudest one in the world. I don't know why. So the question is, what positives can we find? Thank God we have an independent, strong state of Israel and the ability to protect ourselves. Thank God the United States did what they did when they still have the opportunity to support Israel with the Iron Dome. Thank God it happened when it did, because I don't know if it would happen today, but it happened. And you have to see the silver lining. You have to thank God for that. And so now, that takes us back to those two mountains, Har Gerizim and Har Ebal. Bnei Israel are standing between the two mountains. Remember, one mountain is blessing, and the other represents curses. Their heads, their minds, their inclination. Let's go to the good mountain. Let's go with Beracha. It's a choice. God gives you a choice. God gives you the choice. You know, you can't control what you're going to decide. You have to have free choice, otherwise you're a robot. You understand that? Without free choice, you're not a human. You're a robot. So you want to go to good, but inevitably there are people that find their way to Har Ebal, to the curses, and the mountain that represents the curses. And that's the approach avoidance conflict in a nutshell. Choose good or choose evil. Their blessings or curses. Spiritually, both mountains, they compete for our attention. You can become fixated on the terrible things in this world. You can become depressed, you can become cynical, you can wallow in your misery, you can do all of these things, and you could be angry. Or you can focus on the good things, and you can find some goodness that happens in these things. We have to be masters of our attitude. We have to be in charge of our attitude. We have to feel blessed or cursed, but it's our choice. It's up to you. Ladies, it's up to you. You can choose a Har Gerizim and a Har Ebal. And that's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. So, should we call it here right now?
Whenever you had some more.
Okay, I'll take a few questions. There's a lot more I can do, but I don't want to delay you anymore. I know it's a Sunday, and I am so impressed that this large group of women comes out on a Sunday to the synagogue in the morning, and I just hope that Max feels better and gets his family back to healthy and can be back here. But if not, we're not going to stop this course. We're just not going to stop it. We got something that's working. You're making it happen. We're going to do whatever it takes. Okay, a few questions. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, and I'm May with Yerushalayim for Max Messer. I was listening, this has actually Parshas Akeb,
Okay.
about Zev Leth, who explained about when looking at the positive, even when it's extremely bad.
Mhm.
He gives the example of at Behar, when the Jews, when they went out, even though they were told, because this was right after the sin of the spies, that they were very remorseful, but they wanted to still go out. And yes, we're going. They said, no, you can't. Hashem said, don't go. You're not going to win. But they felt they should go anyway, and they lost. And so at Behar,
Which?
Beitar.
Oh, Beitar.
at Beitar,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, okay.
The Behar.
And we're not talking about the soccer team, right?
I was thinking of the mountains. You're thinking of mountains, Beitar. So.
By the way, I just want to tell you, the Sephardic way of pronouncing Beitar is Biter. It's in all the classic sources. No one knows this, by the way. No one knows it, but I just wanted to mention it. But you can call it
That's
Beitar.
good.
I know what you're talking about.
It's good to
It's
know.
on the signs in Israel, Beitar. So we're all good.
Bitter. So
It's
like
bitter. It's
That
for
sounds
sure
like
bitter.
So,
And that's like the Har Ebal. Doesn't it sound like evil?
yes,
Curses, the mountain, evil.
not a
Hey, it's
coincidence.
right in front of you. Come on.
Not a coincidence. But
Okay.
he said because that there was two miracles that happened by this terrible thing, that that when 3 years earlier that they had come back, that the people had come back, and that their deceased had not decomposed, and that they were able to bury them. And for this,
Right.
this was but to Be'av, a segula for girls to have to have shidduchim. And so he said, even if things seem so dismal, focus on the good, and even we see that this became a
Exactly.
positive.
Not only that, but because the descriptions in the Jewish sources about what really happened at Beitar, they piled the bodies up and they made walls out of him, and there was rivers flowing of blood. And the miracle was that the bodies didn't decay until we were able to come back later and bury him. Do you know that there is a beracha in Birkat HaMazon that was established to commemorate this? Hatov HaMeitiv. It's exactly every Birkat HaMazon over bread. It mentions this. It was bad, but there was good in there. Exactly the point. Exactly the point. Very good. My compliments to Rabbi Leff. Yeah. Any other comments, questions? Okay, I think we're going to call it a day, and I just want to thank you for the opportunity.